Will the Water and Infrastructure Committee of February 25th, 2025, please come to order? The time is now 1:37 p.m. May I ask that all participants please silence noise-making devices. Today I am your chair, Tom Cook. Members, per the Sunshine Law, please identify by name who, if anyone, is in the room, vehicle, or workplace with you today, exclusive of minors. Before we begin, I would also like to ask the department representatives who have joined online to please also turn on your cameras when it's your time to speak. I'd also like to ask all the members and guests to use the microphones close to their mouths so everybody can hear. Now I'd like to...
Mahalo, Chair.
Good afternoon, aloha, Susade, Councilmember Shane Sinensi.
Aloha and Susade, Chair, and there are no testifiers at the Hana District Office.
Aloha, good afternoon, Councilmember Nohilani U'uhajans.
Aloha, Chair. Susade, everyone.
Today from the Department of Water Supply, we have Tom Aguat, he's the CIP manager. From the Department of Public Works Council, because of their expertise in today's subject matter as employees of the electric utility company.
Objection.
Thank you. From OCS, our committee staff, Keone Hurdle, Jared Pasquale, Lori Ann Tengan, Maria Leon, and Carla Nagata. Please see the last page of the agenda for information on meeting connectivity. Good afternoon, everyone. For today's meeting, we have 2 items on today's agenda. Sign up in the council chambers lobby, join the online meeting, or call on the phone number noted on today's agenda. For online testifiers, please click the raise your hand button. For those calling in, please follow the prompts via phone, *5 to raise, and raise and lower your hand, *6 to mute and unmute. Written testimony will continue to be accepted and can be submitted via e-comment at mauicounty.us. Okay, staff will now call testifiers.
Thank you, Chair. The first testifier is Mike Moran.
Hello, Chair Cook. I apologize having to read that whole thing for me. I know the words, but I understand the situation. Testifying for the Kihei Community Association today on the second item, Bill 90. We are in complete support of that matter to try and get all these utilities underground. And, you know, for years we have heard the challenges from what used to be MECO, which is now HECO, and I will give one example of community action getting results. Many years ago, then MECO told the South Maui community they had to run the high overhead lines on the Makai side of the Pialani Highway. No choice. There was nothing they could do. It was required, and our community objected, and the response from MECO was, well, we're bound by the PUC, and we have to follow what they tell us. So we contacted the PUC and asked if we could get a meeting held on Maui, preferably in South Maui, and unable or unwilling, they could not do it. Well, shortly after that, PUC had to hold the meeting on Maui because they were MECO was asking for a rate increase. So our community got stimulated and said, we'll go testify. We know this is not on the item we want, but we're going to testify anyway because this is our only chance. And the Coconut Wireless spread the word, and it went way beyond South Maui. Countless number of people went to that meeting, testified, and each person testified. They were told by the PUC that matter's not on the agenda. And we said, well, you wouldn't come and you wouldn't give us a chance. After, I don't know, maybe 20 people testified, the then president of MECO stood up, held up, he said, okay, we get it. We'll find a way. We're not going to run those lines down there. So it showed that things could be done by community interest. So I don't know what HECO is going to say about not the difficulties of doing underground. Well, yeah, but difficulties can be overcome. Our understanding is this has been done on Oahu for decades. So I'm probably out of time, so I appreciate the opportunity to testify. Mahalo.
Thank you, Mr. Moran. Any clarifying questions for our testifier? I encourage you to stay for the entire meeting, Mike, Mr. Moran, because you'll see HECO's is being very cooperative and progressive in this. I think you'll be pleased. Staff?
Sounds good. New regime, new change. Thank you. Aloha.
Staff, any other testifiers?
Yes, Chair. The next testifier is Stacy Alapai.
Aloha again, council members. I just wanted to support this undergrounding measure. I believe it's been discussed for a pretty long time, and it seems like there's more that we could do to underground the lines that are already existing, but at the very least, it'd be great if we could underground new power lines when we have the opportunity to. One example that I'd like to just put forward, which is what got me interested in energy issues in the first place, was that when Old Haleakala Highway got that new sidewalk put in, they were doing a lot of utility work underneath that sidewalk and a lot of digging, and it seemed like a missed opportunity to be able to underground those really unsafe power lines on that street. And I feel like there are a lot of other public works or utility works that happen that if it could be done in coordination with each other, that we could possibly reduce some of the costs related to undergrounding when we time it with other work. But I just want to support this initiative to try to get more of our power lines undergrounded, because it is a source of anxiety for a lot of people and would make our community safer and more resilient when it comes to energy. Mahalo.
Thank you. Members, any clarifying questions for our testifier? Seeing none, thank you very much. Staff?
Chair, I do see one individual in the chamber who looks like they want to testify.
Aloha, Avakea, Luna Ho'omolu Cook, JC Law, He Ali'i Ka'aina, He Kalva, Ke Kanaka. The land is chief, the servant is man. Please refer to if there's property on the Aina, is separate from the Aina. Thank you.
Any clarifying questions? Seeing none? Staff?
Chair, that's currently all the individuals signed up to testify. If there's anyone in the audience or on Teams who would like to testify, please come up to the mic and begin your testimony, or use the raise your hand function on Teams and staff will unmute you. And here's a brief countdown. 3, 2, 1. Seeing none, Chair, no one has indicated that they wish to testify.
Okay, without objection, members, we'll close public testimony for this thing, but after each item, people will be able to give testimony. One acres identified for the real property tax purpose, tax map key 23005-004 for $451,561, and 2, accept the dedication of a water line easement and access easement across the property. Members, to view the appraisal and the preliminary title report, please see Granicus item number 3. I would also like to note that I have transmitted a proposed CD1 version of this resolution attached to today's agenda. Before we begin, Mr. Aguat, would you please provide opening comments from the Department of Water Supply on this item?
Thank you, Chair Cook. I just want to thank all of the council members in considering this purchase for this. What we have is a 2 million gallon concrete water tank on that property that is the primary water tank that feeds all of the Upper Kula residents. And we built it, constructed it, and now we're trying to purchase the land that we've been pursuing. Thank you.
Thank you. Before we begin our discussion, let's see if anyone would like to provide testimony for Y-2 staff. Are there any testifiers?
Chair, there's currently no individual signed up to testify. Would you like me to do a last call?
Please.
If anyone would like to testify, please come up to the podium or raise your hand on Teams. The countdown is 3, 2, 1. Seeing none, Chair, no one has indicated that they wish to testify.
Members, seeing that there are no more individuals wishing to testify without objections, I will now close oral testimony on this item. As a reminder, written testimony will continue.
Purchasing the land, did you construct the water tank on somebody else's land, or how did that work? They gave you
That
permission?
is correct. We have a very good working relationship with Haleakala Ranch, and there's several of our facilities that are on the ranch properties, and it's just unfortunate that we take this long to say, hey, we want to purchase the asset that we have that's on their property. And it's a process that me being in the CIP section of the water department, we eventually get to this point.
So they let us build it on their property, and now we want to purchase the land underneath the asset that we built on their property.
That is correct.
And you mentioned that there's several assets on their property. Would this purchase encompass all the assets or just the one asset?
Well, in addition to the concrete water tank, we have a motor control center building and booster pumps on that property as well.
That we would be purchasing?
They're all are. We've already built it and paid for it. It's just the land that we're more or less.
So with this purchase of land, we're purchasing all the land that the assets we own are on top?
That's correct.
Okay. And
it gives us more rights to do whatever we want on that parcel of land without having permission from Haleakala Ranch to say, hey, we want to add this.
whatever we want in terms of what's legal, right?
Right, that's
Okay,
correct.
just got it. Thanks.
Member Rollins Fernandez, questions for the Water Department?
Mahalo, Chair. Aloha. Mahalo for your opening remarks. Dovetailing off of Member Paulton's line of questions, what's the current nature of our relationship with the property owner? Is it a long-term lease?
Right now is just a kindness of them to allow us to have that facility on their property. Part of the process is we got to go through a co-sponsored subdivision to carve out that parcel of land and then get it appraised and then get, work out a purchase sale agreement. And this all takes time. But our relationship with Haleakala Ranch, especially with the water department, they've been more than helpful and patient and wanting to serve the community.
Okay, so we don't have like a formal, official type of relationship, like legal. It's just
Yes,
handshake?
we have a right of entry agreement to enter that parcel of land, as well as access easements through that up to that water tank. So we do maintain those agreements and access to get up there with Haleakala Ranch.
Okay, mahalo. And then I'm looking at the TMK on the map, and it is so the parcel that we would be acquiring, would it be accessible, or is there an easement to the main road?
Yes, there's an easement that starts from I believe, Upper Kula Highway, that you access it right before you get to the Kula Lodge, about a half a mile on the Haiku side. There's an access gate, and then there's a private road, I guess you could call it, an access road that brings you all the way up to the Omopio tank. And that'd be our access
sorry.
point.
Sorry, I was monitoring another meeting. Did the timer go? Sorry, that caught me off guard.
The timer hasn't gone off yet. If you're finished,
Okay.
you could have
just,
additional questions on your next round.
No, I just wanted to ask a final question that it startled me. So the easement to use the private road from the county roadway to the parcel itself, that is a separate transaction, or is that part of this transaction?
A portion of the road that we've made improvements to is part of this transaction. It's noted in the resolution as an access easement. And then the road continues, I guess you could say, down to the highway. That easement has already been dedicated and recorded.
Okay. Mahalo, Chair.
Okay,
I heard the timer. Mahalo, Chair.
thank you. Chair Lee, questions? No questions?
Thank
Member
you.
Hodges?
Thank you, Chair. I also have no questions. Happy to support.
Thank you.
Member Sinisi?
My question was answered. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Chair doesn't have any questions. I guess, well, I had one question. This is a part of a very large parcel, correct?
That is correct. The larger parcel is 9,900 acres.
So, thank you for that answer. Member Kama, do you have it? Okay. So, members, let me clear my screen here so I can see. Any further questions on this? Okay, with that, seeing no further discussion, we'll move on to decision making. Now, the chair would like to entertain a motion to recommend adoption of Resolution 25-21.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made by Councilmember Hodgins and seconded by Councilmember Kama to recommend adoption of Resolution 25-21. Members, any discussion before I move on to my amended summary form? Seeing none. Members, your chair would like to entertain a motion to substitute Resolution 25-21 with the attached proposed CD1 version, incorporating the amendments referred in ASF's description.
So moved.
So moved by Chair Lee and seconded by Member Kama for the substitution Resolution 25-21 with the proposed attached CD1 version. Members, this ASF, 1, amends the resolution's title. 2, clarifies the parcels affected by the water line and the access easements and the size of each easement. 3, confirms the appraised value of the easement at $1,561 and the appraised value of the 1.811 acres at $450,000. 4, incorporates revisions for clarity, consistency, and style. Any discussion? Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor raise your hand and say aye. Opposed, say no. Staff, you can count.
Aye.
Yes, Chair, that's 6 ayes, 0 noes, and members Sugimura.
Apologies, Chair. We now see Member Paulton online, so that's 7 ayes, 0 noes to excuse members Sugimura and Johnson. Motion passes. You're back to the main motion as amended.
Okay. So main motion as amended. All those in favor of the main motion as amended? Member Paulton? Okay.
Okay, Chair, that's 7 ayes, 0 noes with members Sugimura and Johnson excused. The motion passes.
Thank you, members. Now that we're back to the, okay. Seeing as no further discussion, all those in favor, raise your hand. Thank you, members. This item will move on for the full council's consideration. Chair proposes we take a, any other comments? Yes.
Council Chair Cook, I'd like to request that when you forward it on to council to have it approved on the first reading. We have a scheduled closing date for March 31st. So if it was accepted and approved on March 21st, we would have time to have that closing.
Okay. So noted. Staff, you got that? Okay. Thank you, sir. So we're going to take a 5-minute recess to reset up here for our next item. It is now 2:04. We'll return at 2:09 p.m. Water and Infrastructure Committee of February 25th, 2025, please reconvene at time is 2:12 p.m. Members, Bill 90 amends Chapter 18 Maui County Code, which is the county's subdivision ordinance. Bill 90's purpose is to require the undergrounding of more utility lines, which is an objective of the countywide policy plan and Maui Island Plan. Members, we last heard this item in our Water and Infrastructure Committee meeting of July 2nd, 2024, during the 2023-2025 council term. Bill 90, 2023 proposes requiring underground of utility lines in new subdivisions across Maui County. A key point emphasized during our prior meeting was that the bill does not apply to the rebuilding of Lahaina, but rather to future subdivisions in rural, agricultural, and residential areas. Discussions centered on the cost, feasibility, and potential exemptions for undergrounding utilities with Hawaiian Electric, estimating that undergrounding is 5 to 10 times more expensive than overhead lines. Representatives from the Department of Public Works and Hawaiian Electric noted that the financial burden typically falls on developers, which ultimately increases the home prices. Concerns were also raised about challenges such as encountering blue rock or EV during excavation, the additional permitting requirements, and the time delays associated with underground installations. Committee members discussed balancing a
few things that the chair mentioned already, but they are important to emphasize. First off, this bill is taking effect on new developments, so starting now for new developments, right? I want to remind the members that this policy has been in place on Oahu since the 1960s, right? The current law is all zones except for residential have to do it, right? So we want to include residential. If you look at the survey that was done by Maui County, Lahaina Community Engagement Survey that was done, I think it was Office of Recovery, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think those are the guys who did them. And then it was 85% supported undergrounding power lines. Now this, we all can debate if it's a branch or a stick, but that's one thing we can agree on, that 85% of the people want to bury their power lines in residential.
Afternoon, Jordan Molina, Department of Public Works. Just to restate kind of what we see the effect of this bill is as Member Johnson noted, residential, but it also requires rural and ag districts to also be required to underground. It is applicable to subdivisions and new subdivisions, as was stated. And that's just all I think I really wanted to re-emphasize with my comments today. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Molina. Mr. Post from the Department of Planning is not going to be able to attend. He's at the Planning Commission meeting. Would the Office of Recovery like to provide any opening comments?
Thank you, Chair. John Smith, Office of Recovery, and I have, sorry, let me get it closer. Thank you, Chair. John Smith, Office of Recovery, and I have with me Jordan Hart. I think most of you are familiar with him, but we're here just to help support in terms of recovery's role in undergrounding. We've been starting to strategically align ourselves to help Hawaiian Electric as they work towards undergrounding, in particular in Lahaina. So this bill, while it doesn't directly impact what we're talking about in recovery, we just wanted to be at the table to help things along. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Matt McNeff, and joining me is Shayna Decker from Hawaiian Electric. Consistent with our testimony previously, just to note that this bill is intended to apply to new properties and not meant to cover conversions or replacements of existing overhead infrastructure. Thank you, Chair.
Before we begin our discussion, let's see if anyone would like to provide testimony on Y-12. Staff?
Chair, we currently do not see any individuals signed up to testify. Would you like me to do a last call?
Please.
If anyone would like to testify, please come up to the podium or raise your hand on Teams. This is final call. The countdown is 3, 2, 1. Seeing none, Chair, no one has indicated that they wish to testify.
Members, seeing there are no more individuals wishing to testify without objections, I will now close oral testimony.
No objections, Chair.
As a reminder, written testimony will continue to be accepted into the record. Members, I'm proposing 2 rounds of 3-minute questions per member. Are there any objections? Thank you, members. Let's begin discussion. Councilmember Johnson.
Okay, thank you. Mr. McNeff, am I pronouncing it correctly?
McNeff.
Mr. McNeff, does your company support the undergrounding of power lines?
Yes, we just in January we fired our wildfire safety strategy, and part of that did include strategic undergrounding along with other grid hardening efforts.
So that term strategic undergrounding, that's the one that I think I'm really curious to dig in a bit. You know, one of the things I'm hearing is bury them along the evacuation routes. Is that what you would consider like a strategic placement of these, or can you elaborate on what that means?
Sure. I think that would be one of the considerations. You know, our wildfire safety strategy intends to reduce the risk of wildfire from our infrastructure, and undergrounding is one of the things that can do that, but there are others,
Sure.
including upgrading the poles to steel poles, upgrading the conductor from copper to aluminum, covered conductors. So I guess undergrounding is one of the arrows in the quiver. It is an expensive arrow, so we want to use it judiciously where appropriate.
What about in terms of the WUI? The wildland urban interface, running it along where the, you know, South Maui is a great example. You see one side of the road just wildland and the other side urban. So something like that, is that?
That would be one of the considerations, yes.
Okay. I'd like to hear from the department as far as West Maui. I know this is for new developments, but where particularly in West Maui would you consider a good place to bury power lines, if not everywhere?
Chair, so you say department, you're looking at Office of Recovery. Though,
Yes,
yeah.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
I didn't want to.
No,
Yeah.
We'll start with Office of Recovery, and maybe we can get to Director Molina if I have time.
Okay. Sure. I think Office of Recovery. Okay. I started January 1st. We're getting up to speed really quickly with all recovery efforts. Jordan started after me, but we've obviously been in Public Works and planning for a while, and we've been working with Matt and Shayna all this time. And so we are, the Office of Recovery is trying to align ourselves with these strategic efforts, knowing all of the potential places that make undergrounding feasible and practical, but also the most, bang for the buck, so to speak. So at the wildfire interface, that makes a lot of sense. If we have projects in town where we may do, like, for example, a complete streets effort, where we may widen the road, that would provide another location for strategic undergrounding. There's all sorts of ways that we're thinking through, or helping the county and Hawaiian Electric think through where's the best place to do this, and where can we make Lahaina Town the safest.
Thank you. Since I didn't hear the bell, Director Molina, same question for you. If you need me to repeat, I certainly can.
Oh, yeah, thank you, Chair and Member Johnson, for the question. I mean, the simplest way is wherever there's room and foresight to accommodate. Retrofits is always the most difficult scenario. Then I guess the next thing from a site condition standpoint is groundwater. If groundwater makes it particularly challenging to underground, then that wouldn't necessarily be an ideal place to consider. But yeah, for the most part, if you have this as part of your project from the beginning and you can afford it, it's usually easy to accommodate. Thank you.
I saw that big asterisk if you can afford it, but okay, I hear where you're coming from. And thank you, Committee Chair. Those are my questions for my first round.
Thank you. Member Kama, you have questions for our resource?
Yes. This question is for, since we're already talking to Director Molina. In your letter dated November 6, 2023, regarding Bill 90, you said that the council needs to be aware of the substantial cost increase that will result for these developments, and it could render projects, especially smaller projects and affordable projects, infeasible if there's enough density or subsidy. Can you elaborate on that, please?
Yeah, sure. Perfect example, DHHL's Punani project, they chose to install overhead utilities in large part to help stem the cost of that underground infrastructure to make their project more feasible and cost effective for the beneficiaries.
Thank you. And then my other question is, and I'm not sure if it should go to you or if it should go to someone else, but how much of an increase would undergrounding utilities add or tack on to affordable housing projects? Does anybody know?
There's a lot of variables there, but Matt?
Yeah. So generally, consistent with what the chair said earlier, we estimate that undergrounding is 5 to 10 times the cost of overhead infrastructure.
So what would the alternative be if at some point you couldn't put underground because the lava is just too much to go through?
Well, from a wildfire safety perspective, there's a lot of options you can do. Like I mentioned, you can build back with or build with steel poles. They're stronger. You can use cover conductor in areas where tree branches might be touching the lines. Right now Hawaiian Electric is installing fire mesh on all our wood poles. If you've been out to Lahaina, that's the black mesh that usually extends about 8 foot up the pole. There's Terma mesh at the bottom. So there's a lot of hardening that can be done besides just undergrounding.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. I like this.
Chair Lee, you have questions for our resources?
I was just wondering, you said 5 or 10 times more, what the normal cost of infrastructure would be. So in dollars, what's that range?
In our wildfire safety strategy filing, we estimated that 1 mile of undergrounding costs about $11 million.
As opposed to the hardening would cost what?
It depends on the specific situation and what we'd be doing, but significantly less than that.
Okay. So I'm wondering, if for 11 million for 1 mile, did you say?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Hart, how many, or John, 1 mile would cover how many homes? Because it would be all, amortized, right? Prorated.
Thank you for the question. That's a difficult question to answer without doing some calculations.
Yeah, okay.
You guys...
Well, just wondering, would it be like $500 to $2,000 or $500 to $5,000 or what? No idea.
Well, maybe when you, Matt, could explain a little bit further about the different kinds of undergrounding in terms of like service lines versus transmission lines.
Well, I think he did, that there are alternatives, yeah? You said. Yeah. Okay. Go ahead.
Okay, I think what was referenced is there are different parts of the infrastructure that can be undergrounded. For example, the line that might exist currently from your pole to your house, that could be undergrounded. That's very short distance, typically small wire. That's the cheapest to underground, let's say. If your whole subdivision, you know, all the transformers, all those things would need to come off the poles and go onto the ground.
Mhm.
There's vaults that would be need to be buried, and a loop system throughout the whole subdivision. That's where it starts to get more expensive. And then probably the most expensive is like the transmission lines. You can think of the lines that go through West Maui mountains. I mean, that doesn't really seem like a place that's even feasible to underground. So.
Well, several homes are being built already, so are they using any of these devices?
Typically, newer subdivisions are built with underground infrastructure. I think typically, the infrastructure is laid out prior to the homes, and then the homes are adjusted according to where the lines will be run. And then that cost can be included in the mortgage when the homeowners buy into that subdivision.
Okay, thank you. The member from Lanai Electric can answer that.
I only wanted to add on because you were talking about the costs, right? Howard Kahuni came before this council and asked for $900,000 to bury his power lines on his project. You guys know where that is. So if you want a visual, it was $900K for that. Now that part I don't know. I just know the price of the total. So.
Yeah, and I think that was a subsidy to help assist and not the total cost. So.
It's going to be a capital stack, of course. Yeah.
Member Paulton, you have questions for our resource people?
My apologies for missing the presentation. Hopefully I don't ask anything that was already covered. I was wondering if you guys knew if you could explain how Act 12 would give us more power, I guess, in relation to Bill 90, like a compare and contrast.
Matt?
I'm sorry, I'm Act
of
12.
the session laws of 1991. It says the council has a great deal of power to require undergrounding or installation of electrical lines on Maui. This power comes via the Maui Electric Franchise Statute enacted in 1991, Act 12 of the Session Laws of 1991. This power is not widely known on Maui and may be a surprise to even council members. So I'd love to be surprised at the power that we have, but I'm asking if you know what it is.
I'm sorry, I'm not that familiar with Act 12.
Shayna, do you have any knowledge of that?
No, we're not familiar with that.
It says a bill for an act relating to the grant of a franchise for the island of Maui to Maui Electric Company Limited. A franchise for the island of Maui, state of Hawaii, is hereby granted to Maui Electric Company Limited to read in its entirety as follows. Franchise, the corporation is granted the right, authority, and privilege to manufacture, sell, furnish, and supply electric light, electric current, or electric power on the island of Maui. Poles not to interfere with streets, plants subject to inspection, meters and rates, extensions of lines and charges for making connections, rights to acquire property, limits to power to borrow money and bonds, that the franchise is not exclusive, forfeiture of franchise, rules to enforce rates, eminent domain, annual statement payment to the government, regulation. None of that sounds familiar? Or,
That does sound familiar. I believe that is granting Hawaiian Electric or Maui Electric our franchise rights. Not speaking specifically about the or right to underground there, but there are various laws that require undergrounding in certain situations, and we comply with them. So whatever would be required is what we would do.
so you don't think that act gives more broad authority to the council than like Bill 90, or that was a misrepresentation of the testifier?
No, I can't speak to whether it's, more authority than Bill 90.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Member Paulton. Member Rollins Fernandez? Questions?
Mahalo, Chair. So I was thinking about the cost of maintaining all of the roads that we're responsible for. And, if we thought about it, maintaining all of the roads at once, like that's like billions of dollars. Just like undergrounding all the lines at once would be billions of dollars. And so I don't remember exactly how Public Works sets how much money is spent on road maintenance each year. But if we looked at it in like from that standpoint of, setting aside X amount of money annually and like having a plan to underground certain high priority areas that wouldn't be too costly, that wouldn't disturb Iwi Kupuna, that wouldn't have, bluestone, wouldn't be hard, you really need dynamite or anything like that. And that was in areas that would make the most sense, like evacuation zones. So if it was mapped out and then just a set amount that we're saying we're going to cap it at this much, and whatever this much can get us annually, then that's how much lines we would bury annually. And then that way we're not looking at it as like all or nothing, billions of dollars, way too expensive, because we don't look at maintaining roads that way. And so thoughts on that?
Matt?
Charlie, you got to mute.
Thank you for the question. So Hawaiian Electric isn't opposed to Bill 90. We're in favor of it. And kind of what you described with regards to prioritizing, I guess where we get the most bang for the buck on undergrounding is what we've done in the wildfire safety strategy. We've committed already to approximately 2 miles of undergrounding in Lahaina. And then just for reference, over half of the lines currently for Maui County are already undergrounded.
I also wanted to add for the 2 miles that he mentioned, that's actually being funded in part of the federal grant that we were awarded recently. So we are looking at federal opportunities to pay for strategic undergrounding and hardening as part of the wildfire safety strategy.
Wonderful. Well, hopefully the federal government doesn't implode and you can get that funding for that support. Mahalo. Mahalo, Chair.
Thank you. And Councilmember Uhu Hodgins.
Thank you, Chair. I did have a clarification question. So, Member Johnson, if you don't mind, in the beginning of your explanation, you said it's only applicable to new and residential subdivisions. Do you think that needs to be specifically stated, or when it says all subdivisions, does that just, where do you see that it only references new and
Because
residential?
every subdivision already is required to bury power lines except for residential.
And so maybe I'll ask this question then to Jordan Molina. Say a multifamily unit, let's say Schatz is one because it's the closest one, needs to, if they didn't already have underground power lines, re-roof their place and they needed permits, would then they need to also underground their electric?
Director?
No, it's for new.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Member Hodgins. Yeah, so this bill applies to new subdivision applications the way it's structured in the subdivision code. So only activities or developments that are coming in for subdivisions would trigger this requirement. So in your example, permits for building modifications would not be a subdivision action and not require a subdivision permit that would then trigger this requirement we're discussing today. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I know that that's what you said, and then I forget, Director Molina said something similar, but I just wanted to double check, because all subdivisions, I realize where we're at is all subdivisions. So I wanted to double check with that. My other question is, when you guys do, for HECO, when you guys do your undergrounding, what kind of permitting process do you go through? How long does it typically take? And how much does the permitting part take? I'm wondering because we, as a council, love and should continue to support affordable housing developments. But if we're adding on to their costs, that means they're going to also, and they should probably ask us for more money. So I want to kind of brace for that impact. Can you tell me what that looks like?
Chair, if I may.
Oh, please.
I have some direct information on that. So, so going back to the recent project right up the street with DHHL, their costs to install overhead utilities for the 161 lots out there is approximately $700-800 per lot. To install underground, it would have been $21,000 per lot. And so those are pretty hard numbers from a recent development with, contractor pricing. Thank you, Chair. And I guess to note too, that's easy digging up there because you're just in dirt as opposed to Kie or Lahaina where you're in the blue rock. Thank you.
I heard my bell. I'll save my questions for the
Thank
next
you,
round.
Director.
Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Member Hodgins. Councilmember Sinensi?
Thank you, Chair. And mahalo, Mr. McNeff, for being here, you guys. I was going to ask, so is HECO, are they, even though this is for new construction, are you guys just working on burying lines in the Lahaina district?
Yeah, as part of our wildfire safety strategy, we are sort of doing a risk analysis and trying to mitigate wildfire risk. We estimate so far that we've reduced the wildfire risk from our infrastructure 60%. So we kind of do a calculation, and depending on the location and what the risk might be, we determine what kind of measures we might take, whether those are operational changes or grid hardening type of measures. And as I mentioned, in our wildfire safety strategy, we did commit to undergrounding approximately 2 miles in Lahaina.
In Lahaina, too.
Yes.
Okay, so you guys are already doing that. You're not waiting for Bill 90 to come into effect. Okay,
it's planned for between 2025 and 2027.
Okay, and then you mentioned that there's other hardening methods, copper to aluminum, metal poles. If you are burying or digging into the ground, does it have to be buried with gravel at a certain depth, or could they be, covered with a metal grate in a cement? Can they be also buried in other ways besides just burying it?
Traditionally, it is buried, and that is actually where most of the cost for undergrounding comes from, the earthwork. We have, there are some utilities that are piloting sort of like a on-ground distribution system, and we're keeping a close eye on that to see how that turns out. Obviously, it has to be able to withstand cars driving over it and closer contact with humans, those type of things. So we're waiting to see how pilots turn out, and should they be successful, I think that's something we might implement.
So you are anticipating kind of new types of technology that might help to bring down the costs?
Definitely.
Okay, all right. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Member Snitsky. Chair will wait for everybody else to have their second round. So, Member Johnson, your second round of questions.
Thanks for reminding. You operate statewide, right?
5 islands.
Thanks for reminding me. You know, you make an assumption, right? So I'm curious, state or city and county of Honolulu has been doing this since the 60s. I don't see that them coming around and saying, we got to pass this on to the home buyer. Somehow, some way, it's being shuffled through their capital stack or something. I'd like to hear how do you guys operate with that law on that island?
So in Oahu, we do follow that ordinance as part of Hawaiian Electric, and that is paid through the developers of those properties, the subdivisions. Yeah.
So they pass the costs on to the builders.
Correct, because they're requesting the service, so then they get the quote for what it would take to either underground or overhead, depending on what their plans call for.
It continues, this talking point continuously comes up. Well, how do they pay for it then? Can you respond to that? How are the builders making it pencil out?
I believe same that would happen here. They pass the cost on to the home buyers.
Yet our median home price in this county on Maui Island is higher than everybody. So that's the part. I mean, you think it's just demand? Is your response? Or I'm wondering why our houses are still so expensive, and yet for Honolulu has been doing it time immemorial.
I can't speak to the cost comparison, but I mean, a lot of subdivisions are currently undergrounded here. Like I mentioned, over 50% of the lines for Maui County are undergrounded already.
Right. So we're doing it half without the bill. Half of the time we're doing it.
I think much of the other half are older homes, older subdivisions, older developments.
The older homes have underground power lines. The newer ones don't.
Reverse.
Okay, so the newer ones have the underground power lines. The older ones don't. Okay. All right. So somehow it's penciling out for these builders now. Okay, that's my questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Member Johnson. Member Kama?
I just wanted to ask a question of Mr. Johnson. Earlier part, you told us that 85% of the people that were interviewed or surveyed, right, said they wanted their lines to be buried. How many people were in the survey?
Maybe the Office of Recovery can respond, because that is from you guys' right? That's your department that put that on. I'm correct, yeah? Let me pull up my photo here.
Yeah, I don't know which survey you're...
Okay, it was called here it is right here. The Lahaina Community Engagement Survey. We Department of Planning was the ones who might have put it on, so.
I think you may be correct. Chair, I think that, I don't know the numbers anyway, so we can look up, we can ask Planning Department how many were in that survey.
I would like to know those numbers, because 85% of 100 is 85 people, but we have a population of 160,000 people, and I'd really like to see,
Well, it was focused on the Lahaina,
Or the recovery.
Right.
Okay.
Oh, wait, I think I have the number. It just got texted me. 3,833 people were engaged in the survey.
Okay. 85%. Okay.
Yeah,
Said yeah.
85% of 3,000.
Of the 3,000, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. There's 130,000 people out there somewhere. But anyway, that's just my thought about, if we're adding costs onto residentials, if it adds on to the cost of the homeowner themselves, and that's where I was going with that. And then for Mr. Johnson, when I think about Honolulu, you know what I think about? High rises. High rises, high rises, high rises, high rises. We lived in a really old neighborhood, so all of our lines were above the ground. Once New Valley them started coming in and Ho'ikai, they were all started to get buried by that time. But it makes sense for what you want to do, where you want to do. But where I lived, it wasn't on the volcano. It wasn't, the blue rocks that we have to go through and you have to blast through, like in Kona on the Big Island, it's expensive. So I just want to make sure that if we're going to do this for the right reasons, let's make sure that we do the most feasible thing that's not going to impact our people in such a negative way that home ownership is so definitely out of their reach and out of their. So if there's alternatives, I'd like to hear more about that. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair Lee. Your second round of questions? No questions? Member Paulton, second round of questions?
I guess I had a question for the bill introducer where it says utility lines, including those required for electric, telephone, street lighting. One of the issues that we have, street lighting, we wanted it back in the burn zone yesterday, but it's taking longer, is that the street lighting is on the poles. So if there isn't poles, who's responsible for the street lighting? How are you envisioning the street lighting to happen, from the ground up, or the county has to go and put in all the poles, or because that's an issue that came up, right?
Now, I thought, and they're here today, so doesn't MECO build the streetlights for the county?
Because we have poles, but if we don't have
so
poles,
what, in that scenario, how's that work?
I think we're on the hook for the. If you can.
Let them answer.
So if it's an underground area where there are no poles to attach, like sort of the typical street lights, then there would be the dedicated street light sort of pole, like a street light on an aluminum pole that you see in those areas. Or in Lahaina, they have sort of like the historic lantern type looking street lights.
And who pays for that? Oh, I'm sorry.
That's the question. Who's responsible for that? Would MECO still be doing that, or is it now not you guys?
It would depend on if it's so we own and operate the streetlight system, and we have a tariff to do so. So, like a rule that has been approved by the PUC to charge for that service. And if it's an existing pole that just needs like a lamp to be changed out, that would be handled through that tariff. If it's a new installation, a new location, maybe that didn't have a streetlight before, the county would request that. And oftentimes, if it's in a subdivision, it's also put in at the same time as the subdivision infrastructure.
So you guys would pay for it?
No.
Oh,
no. So
us guys would pay for it?
It depends on the situation. So same like the underground infrastructure, if it's a subdivision, typically the developer is going to install it. And then when they maybe turn the roads over to the county, the streetlights will come to us in that situation.
How much does a streetlight cost without a utility pole? Are you aware?
I'm not.
Are you guys aware?
Maybe Director Molina could answer that.
Yeah, thank you. We pay for all of that. So in existing subdivisions that have underground installations, we do get requests for new street lights, and we have to do all the work to install the dig dig down, install new conduits, install new vaults in the ground, install the pole base, and get everything ready. And I believe HECO brings the pole and the light, but charges us for all of that. So that is a substantial more cost for street lighting in underground setting. Thank you.
Can I clarify? Because it sounded like we do all the work and then they pay us, they charge us for the work we did. Is that what you said?
Director.
Yeah, so again, when we want new infrastructure, it's the same as development wanting an infrastructure. So we pay that cost. Even the portion that HECO performs, you know, they charge us for that additional work, that new work, so to speak, to get those installations done.
The original question was like cost per street light, if you knew.
Yeah, I'm trying to find, we did one recently in Waikapu that was a standalone, add a new street light in an underground subdivision. So let me get back to you with that cost. Thank you.
Thank you.
Director. So Chair Lee, you decided you have a question?
Quick question. So with all this underground work, do you have to bring in more people, resources, equipment? Does it take much longer to do that, to install that? And by the way, I was just wondering how you eat Saimin.
Regarding the first question, what was the question again? The Simon thing.
How, do we have enough people, employees on Maui to do all that undergrounding work?
Oh, we have the ability to bring in additional resources to perform whatever work needs to get done, whether it's contractors or crews from like Oahu or Big Island.
Thank you for that serious question. Member Rollins Fernandez, your second question, second round. Come back to you.
Yes, please.
Member Hodgins.
Okay, if I could pick up where I left off, specifically, I guess we were talking about the DHHL project, at it being $780 per lot with overhead and $21,000 per lot with underground. If somebody could please explain the delta in the cost. Where is the cost? Permitting, earthwork, undergrounding, what, can you please just
share
something?
If I may?
Yeah, please, thanks.
Yeah, it's a largely all the digging. So what goes into an underground system is you have to install vaults. These vary in size, but the biggest ones are 7 feet by 11 feet and 7 feet deep. These are huge vaults, and smaller ones. Then you have to run the duct lines, which is PVC pipe that's buried and concrete jacketed throughout the entire neighborhood. Then there is pads for the pad-mounted equipment, primarily your transformers. And all that digging and extra site prep is where all that extra cost is. Because HECO still charges to come in, pull lines, set the equipment needed. So whether that's on a pole or underground, you know, you still have that cost. It's just the underground, you have all that associated digging and hard infrastructure work that is where that delta is.
Wow. So consistently we hear issues, or I guess not issues, but rather concern with timing for SHPD to review permits. If we were to do an underground permit, which as I heard about 50% of people do, probably for aesthetic reasons, can you describe to me what the permitting process looks like for that?
Director
Molina.
Yeah, so typically we're talking about installations that are occurring with a development, so a subdivision, for example. So they would already be engaged in that permit process with all the other digging work involved, the site grading, the water lines, the sewer lines, et cetera. So, you know, in that regard, not too significant extra, but if we're going to talk about retrofitting and doing a standalone undergrounding project, then, you know, that project by itself would be subject to those reviews as well.
In what case do you think we would need retrofitting?
So usually, like when we do CIP projects, is primarily the driver of, or going into existing areas to underground, which we don't do often because, you know, we don't have unlimited budgets either to try and do all our roadway projects. So we often don't opt to do undergrounding and just kind of make the other surface improvements work around the utility poles.
Okay. And out of curiosity for me, will you describe like the layer cake of all the different utilities, like what goes on top of what? You know, I'm assuming water and sewer cannot go above the electrical lines. Can you describe what that layer cake looks like underground?
Yeah, so sewer is typically your deepest, usually 7 foot and deeper. Then your drain lines, which are about 5 feet. Then your water lines, which run about 3 feet. And then your electrical utility is usually on top or on the side around similar depths. I think they might allow a little shallower because of the concrete jacketing.
Okay. Thank you. Do I have a bunch of time left? I don't want to get stopped mid-question.
I haven't heard the bill yet.
Okay, great. For OOR, since you guys are here, oh, see?
You can finish. This is your second round. So
Okay, good.
You can finish your question.
How do you guys feel about this bill? Where do you think this is going to be impacting you the most?
Department.
Yeah. I'm going to let Jordan take a stab at this.
Thank you for the opportunity to participate. Basically, if there are new subdivisions that are part of the recovery effort, that it would apply to those as the bill is written now. That would be the most obvious application.
Well, in general, we support undergrounding and hardening efforts strategically. I don't see a lot of subdivisions happening in Lahaina, in the burn zone anyway. It's possible. One question I had for if Director Molina is still on that might weigh into this is if there are an existing neighborhoods like consolidation, re-subdivisions, and that sort of thing, would this trigger retroactively then?
Director? Director Molina, did you hear the question?
I'm trying to understand.
Sorry, multitasking. Please, yeah, if you could repeat it, please. Thank you.
Director, we're just, we're speaking openly here, of course, but the question for recovery is if we support this bill, but we're still vetting this bill. I'm trying to figure out if retroactively, if there was like a consolidation re-subdivision effort, would this bill trigger those parcels to require undergrounding?
As far as the rebuild and subdivision actions, yeah, I mean, aside from, even that might not really trigger it, but it would be really driven by somebody trying to split up their parcel, which in Lahaina, in the burn zone, we don't have too many parcels that really would be looking to do that. You'd be talking more about your open ag lands coming in for subdivisions that may be triggering this. What's going to trigger more on the undergrounding side is our building code requirement that requires those frontage improvements and undergrounding. That is going to happen on a large scale for all the non-residential properties, which we are working to try and coordinate those improvements on. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Molina. So, in general, we support undergrounding. This bill doesn't directly impact much of what we're doing for the recovery within the burn zone. So from that sense in recovery, we're not really taking a position. I would say that's where we are today.
Member Sinisi?
Thank you, Chair. I just want to follow up on Member Uhajan's questioning to Director Molina. Director, so if developers are having to create these vaults in the new subdivision developments, are they, do you see them kind of putting all of the infrastructure into one area? I mean, I guess it would kind of bring down some of their costs if they're putting in their wastewater, their water, their electric, all in within, you know, these vaults. You see them doing that more often?
Director?
No, these are separate vaults just for the this is for the overhead utilities, but they do include your cable and telephone lines as well. So those are all part of the undergrounding effort. When they do that extra work to install that infrastructure, it's inclusive of typically your electrical, cable, TV, and telephone.
Oh, okay. And then
But I guess to add real quick, yeah, it's easier on a brand new site when you don't have those existing constraints to work around to accommodate the undergrounding.
right, that can be part of the early conceptual of the project. Another question: does this affect any future CIP projects for the county?
Only where we be developing housing, so not in terms of public works CIP for road maintenance or road projects.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Chair.
Member Rollins Fernandez, your second question?
Well, hello, Chair. I remembered it. Thank you for that time. So this is the first time I heard about half of the lines being undergrounded. I know places like, the pretend farms in La New Poco, mansions have lines undergrounded. Is it like more luxury subdivisions that have lines undergrounded because they can afford that, and so they can afford that level of safety, and the rest of our residents don't get to have that level of safety? Do you track where the undergrounded lines are? I mean, you must.
Is that question from Hiko? Or who?
Whoever has the answer.
Okay. Anybody want to answer that?
Yeah, I guess I'll take a stab at that. Yeah, so, if you're outside those areas that already require it for subdivisions, then it's really the development's option, depending on, again, the product that they're providing and the pricing that they can afford. For the most part, new subdivisions going in have been undergrounding. I think, that DHHL is the first one I recall recently that, specifically opted to do overhead. So in new developments, it's generally been undergrounded. Thank you.
So when you say new development, it doesn't really speak to like the housing development itself, aside from DHHL. But like the affordability of that subdivision, if it's more luxury end or more affordable end, just new.
Yeah, any new project where you're breaking, previously undeveloped lands and you're coming in and putting in a development, it's easier to accommodate in that setting because you've already got this large project going on, which is totally different than trying to come down your neighborhood and go install those lines underground when everybody already lives there and is a CIP project. Two completely different scenarios. And then, in the case of market rate, as was pointed out earlier, Maui's got high prices, so the price points make it more feasible to install that. And of course, the product they want to sell, everyone enjoys not having poles and lines in their view. So it encourages that underground installation. Thank you.
Mahalo, Director. And if anyone else wanted to comment, you're welcome to. I just had that one question.
Just a side comment, I think with regards to the safety aspect, historically, I think probably most of the undergrounding has been done for aesthetic reasons, as opposed to, specifically for safety.
Okay. Yeah. Well, the Lahaina fire was sparked by overhead lines. I don't know what the final conclusion was, but the fire up the Crater Road, I think, was overhead lines. And I don't have the entire history of how fires started, but I can understand why that was a necessary comment for this public meeting. I do have a question for clarification. So in my earlier question, when I asked, and you said that 2 miles of line are being undergrounded, was that 2 miles specifically Lahaina 2 miles, or there's a 2 miles in Lahaina and 2 miles outside of Lahaina?
Matt?
The commitment in the wildfire safety strategy was specifically for approximately 2 miles of undergrounding in Lahaina.
Okay, mahalo for that clarification. Mahalo, Chair.
Thank you. Members, okay, I was going to say any more burning questions, and then Chair will ask his questions. Member Hodges?
Thank you, Chair. I was trying to figure out what Director Molina was talking about. Director Molina, are you talking about Chapter 16.25.201, where it talks about undergrounding as it faces public streets and new structures?
That's correct. Yeah, that's the building code trigger that we're going to be dealing with in Lahaina with the rebuilds of those non-residential properties.
Okay, so that one is just only non-residential properties. It says new structures. But
yeah, if you read through the end, there's an exclusion.
Okay. Exceptions, single-family dwellings, but not multifamily dwellings?
Not multifamily.
Okay, that's all I wanted to kind of get some clarification for my own understanding. Thank you.
Member Paulton, did you raise your hand?
Yes, please. I think my question would probably be for the Office of Recovery, or also maybe MECO, because Office of Recovery might only be the burn zone in Lahaina, but with the PSPS areas, and is there Member Rollins Fernandez was saying previously, a prioritization of areas that we would look at, that undergrounding is a key safety move. I don't know if Member Hodgins was referring to Skill Village and places like that, where it's for me, I would say probably Mill Camp, but I don't think people wanted to underground it because then they would have to widen the street and all of that. But, there's areas I think that are more, it would be more on the safety scale if it were undergrounded. But then I guess, because the road widths may be less than 28 feet or something, then it's not practicable. But if we were to try to prioritize which areas for safety, is there anything started along those lines? Here are identified areas where, a spark would be devastating to the whole entire subdivision, so maybe we should do it. Or is there no prioritization, either Office of Recovery or MECO? Because I know you can prioritize the PSPS areas, so I would imagine within the PSPS areas, there should be some subdivisions that have been prioritized.
Chair. Thank you for that question. I think I'll just summarize our approach with Hawaiian Electric, and then I'll let them speak specifically to PSPS. So, Office of Recovery, obviously exists to help the county organize itself in a coordinated response to this disaster. So, we're trying to be more holistic with these kinds of problems. Oftentimes, they are siloed into either it's a Hawaiian Electric problem, it's a Public Works problem, it's a Planning Department zoning problem, oh no, that's a MEMA problem, or that's a Fire Department problem, or that's just a state issue because that's state land. So we understand that those silos exist, and our organization is really meant to help bring those teams and those entities together to have a more coordinated approach on these very important issues. So we understand how important undergrounding is, and we understand that our role is to help bring those groups together so that we can work together strategically to make Lahaina as safe as it possibly can be in the future. Always understanding that there's a cost to everything that we do. So how do those costs line up, both for the county, and how much can HECO do, like for that 2 miles in particular? How can we best work with them to help make that 2 miles go as far as it possibly can to make Lahaina as safe as it possibly can? So that's our approach, and that's why I wanted to be here today, just to say that. But I'll turn it over to Hawaiian Electric to go from there.
Matt?
Sure, thanks for the question. So as part of the wildfire safety strategy plan that we submitted, we did do that. We did a risk assessment for all of the islands we serve and all of our infrastructure across those different circuits. Grid hardening is only one of the 4 pillars of the wildfire safety strategy. The other one is operational practices, which includes PSPS, like you mentioned, deploying spotters during weather that may be conducive to wildfire starting. There's also operational practices. We've changed the settings across the grid so that they're much more sensitive to any problems that occur. We also now do visual inspection in high wildfire areas prior to re-energizing lines. So there's kind of like a multifaceted approach. We've increased situational awareness. There's cameras, 50-something cameras across the state that detect wildfires and notify first responders. We have weather stations also across the state to help monitor conditions. And then lastly, also engaging stakeholders and community participation. We've had a wildfire symposium last year where we brought everyone to talk about all these things. So I know we focus on sort of the grid hardening aspect, but we have done a risk assessment. I mentioned that through all of these efforts, not only grid hardening, but also operational and otherwise, we've been able to reduce the wildfire risk. We estimate about 60% for our infrastructure.
I wish we did that in 2018. It looks like Mr. Molina has his hand up.
Director?
Yeah, thank you. Just to add, related to the incident and particularly relating to the evacuation component, we are in coordination with HECO to look at prioritizing where undergrounding or hardening should be focused. And there's competing needs on that. So for example, the highway, right? Those are major arterial roads. Do we target those first, or do we look at the neighborhoods and ensure the neighborhoods can get out? Then you have a combination of that and our major intersections and making sure those are able to remain open and can be traveled when we have incidents. So we're looking at how we strategize to prioritize where we harden and underground, knowing that we don't have open checkbook to just go at it. And then real quick, Chair, if I may, to Member Paulton's question about streetlights, to install a new streetlight on existing utility pole is about $2,500. To install a new streetlight in a existing subdivision with undergrounding is about $30,000. Thank you.
Substantial difference. Thank you. Thank you, Director. Anybody else before the chair's question and final? So for our guest and resource people from HECO, old school, basically the rate structure is set up from the PUC that basically when you say, a new subdivision, the developer will put in the infrastructure, HECO will do the design because it's to your specifications, correct? Then the the developer will do the installation, and the homeowner is going to absorb those prices as part of the development of that infrastructure. When you do infrastructure, whatever it may be, then basically that gets paid on through the increased rates to all the payers. So I guess my perspective is a group of people who are doing underground and new homes, they're paying for their own. Whereas when you do something and HECO is paying the freight, all of the ratepayers are being ended up paying for that. Is that generally accurate?
Correct.
Regarding underground, and it's a question, but also just sort of an educational thing. So when Director Molina talks about the vaults are really large because basically they have, men have to get inside it and they have to pull the cables, and the cables are like really stiff and Mondo cables depending upon the capacity of the current that's going through. And so that's part of the reason these vaults are exceptionally large. And then they have the multiple covers that are going on top. And those vaults can cost $30,000, depends upon the magnitude and the size for a major one, or it can be $5,000 or, when you're doing underground power, do you always do dual ducts? So like you'll have redundancy in the PVC pipes, and so you put it in, but if there's a problem, you have the extra duct to be able to pull it afterwards?
Well, typically underground installations, when there is a problem, it's more difficult to detect as well as more difficult to repair. So that redundancy, if we didn't have that redundancy that you mentioned, the affected customers would be out for a long period of time. The redundancy allows us to make the repair relatively quickly, as opposed to overhead lines where typically if the line breaks, it's very easy to find and a crew can relatively quickly repair it. So that's what the redundancy is for.
So, and then as far as the concrete jacketing, that's wherever it's vehicular rated or it depends upon the size of the conduits. So you dig in the trench, putting in bedding, putting in the conduits, putting in bedding to protect the pipe, or putting a concrete jacket on the whole thing. So anyway, I'm just saying there's a lot to underground electric as opposed to putting in a pole and stretching the wires, which is no small feat, special equipment, special skills. My second to the last question, is there much difference between a pole-mounted transformer and ground-mounted transformers?
As far as cost, yeah, the ground-mounted cost more because, there's more chance that people will come in contact with it, whereas opposed to pole top, it's more exposed. And then also, the real estate it takes up. That a pad mount is going to take up part of someone's yard, whereas pole mounts don't really affect people's property.
Okay, thanks. So, Director Molina, the residential exemption in this, am I correct? That's like for 3 lots and less, but generally speaking, a residential subdivision is already required to do underground electric?
No, so currently residential zone property is excluded, so they're not required to underground in a new residential subdivision.
So my bad in the way I asked the question. This bill will require it to be for underground for residential subdivisions. Is there an exemption for 3 lots or less?
No, we have no exemptions for that at this time.
Thank you for the clarification. Any closing comments from our HECO representatives?
Just appreciate the opportunity to come here and discuss this with everyone. Councilmember Lee, I eat Simon with chopsticks. Thank you.
Director Molina, any closing comments?
Thank you, Matt, for clarifying the mystery.
That's it? Okay, Office of Recovery from our 2 representatives. Do each have a closing comment?
I too appreciate you having us today, Chair, and I ate Simon with chopsticks right before this meeting, so yeah. Sure.
Thanks, Chair. It's a very good conversation. We appreciate being included. Thank you.
So, members, any closing comments before we, I'm proposing that we defer this. Are there any objections for deferring this item? Member Johnson?
Sure, I'm curious, what's the reason for the deferral, and how can I make the bill better if there is some reason? I'm willing to amend it and make the council, the committee come to some meeting point.
In general, Member Kama, and then Member Paulton.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to respond to Member Johnson. Why he's asking for the deferral in terms of making it better. I think the response from Ms. Molina regarding the reason for DHL to go overhead as opposed to undergrounding, the 7,800 versus the 21,000. So thank you, Chair.
Member Paulton.
Thank you, Chair. For me, the way we should do it would be to prioritize those subdivisions that make that are most dangerous, that make the most sense to do it, and then identify the funding source and go about it that way. Because obviously we can't do it all at one time. But I think that would be the way forward, is prioritize those subdivisions, meet with the subdivisions if that's something that they would accept, and then figure out a funding mechanism.
So if I can ask a clarifying question on that, that would be existing subdivisions as well as new subdivisions?
Both, yeah, because if you're building a new subdivision in a really windy area, then it seems like that would be one you would want to prioritize. And then existing subdivisions, why would we leave our existing residents out of that as well? To me, that's the way forward, is prioritize which ones would be the most dangerous, and then identify the funding source, identify the people that are involved, and how we can go about it. Because if we pass a legislation, it's not one size fits all, and how you roll it out is important. So if we just focus on the rolling it out part and identifying the most dangerous areas, and then how we're gonna do it, to me that's preferable way to go about it. Because like, say you pass this legislation and we hit all the rich neighborhoods first, like nobody's gonna want that, like people will be really upset, I think. Like, oh, only the wealthy neighborhoods deserve to be protected through undergrounding, or, you know what I mean? So, I mean, I think the way that it's rolled out is more important. And I see Mr. Molina has his hand up, so I'll yield if that's okay with you, Chair.
Yes. Director Molina, your comments?
Thank you, Chair. I just want to make sure the body understands that this bill would not affect existing subdivisions, and it will not prompt any action by the county or the landowners to underground in an existing subdivision. So I just want to make sure that it's clear that should this bill pass, it's only new subdivisions that would be triggering this requirement. Thank you, Chair.
Member Johnson.
Okay, so I'm trying to find some kind of consensus here, but I gotta remind some members where we're at. Fire, of course, is a hazard. That's what's got us here. But so is being out of power for days, and undergrounding power lines is a way to make sure you don't go. And if a Kona storm comes, in 2016, Lanai was out of power, as you know, for about 3 days, and Kapuna's medicine wasn't cold, and they were suffering. The baby's milk formula wasn't cold, and they were suffering. In 2016, I said, I wish we should have done something. 2018 fires happened. Wish we should have done something. Now we're in the Lahaina fires. Wish we should have done something. This is something we can do today. We know that the cost of a town is, you can't compare it with the cost of burying power lines. The loss of life, you can't compare. We spend now to save later. I really think that should be the message here. This is not for existing homes. This is for new homes that are going to be built out from away, the city centers, out and infill, all those places that don't have anything on them now. That's where this bill focuses on. I mean, if you're going to defer this bill to what? To what? I mean, sure, but I'm willing to call for the question. You know, I'd be willing to answer that call. So I just don't want us to keep not doing anything and responding to these big events. You know, we have to do, this is important.
So, if I may, my deferral is not to not do anything with it. It's basically similar to what Member Paulton was just saying about continuing to identify some of the obstacles and the hurdles, getting the pricing. I'm an advocate of doing it, and I'm also hesitant to mandating something that is going to significantly increase the pricing. I think we have the opportunity when affordable housing projects come before us and other projects come before us to have that as one of the conditions as far as either subsidizing, augmenting it. So anyway, I see Chair Lee, if you would like to make a comment.
Yeah, I feel sorry for Mr. Johnson. I know how you feel, but right now it's looking like an insurmountable issue of money at this point. Of course, over there is Mr. Smith, who will be handling $1.6 billion. So I don't know if any of that is going toward undergrounding power. Is it? Okay, so that's one good thing. I think we need to increase the toolbox that Mr. McNeff mentioned about what?
He said arrow in the quiver.
Arrow in the quiver. Yeah, we need more arrows in the quiver. And it seems that we do have some, though, and we should utilize them, especially if they're much more reasonably priced, number one. And then wherever we need, the heavy investment, we just turn to Mr. Smith. But also the company does some on their own, where all the taxpayers pay. And I think there are times when we have to do that. Thank you.
Director Molina, could you weigh in if the impact of passing it versus the impact of not passing it? I'm curious insofar as the review and approval for subdivisions, for permitting, et cetera, the impact.
I guess on one hand, it makes things simpler because there's there's only one standard now, everybody undergrounds. Again, just to reiterate that we're talking about new subdivisions, which the trend has been that developers are more inclined to underground than not. Doesn't affect DHHL because they have authorities that supersede the county, that they can do what they like do on their projects. And so I think probably the bigger impact is going to be your ag subdivisions, probably more so than residential from what we've been seeing in recent projects. Thank you, Chair.
Member Hodgins.
Thank you, Chair. I'm happy to support whatever you want to do right now, but I would like to say I'm not necessarily against figuring out how to make something like this work. We all have things we have to do in life, and you have to make a balance. Like, I don't buy a cheap car seat for my kids because it's not a safe option. So I understand where you're coming from. I think it's worth, though, having a conversation on what strategic undergrounding looks like and what the additional hardening we can do with some of the infrastructure that we're going to see coming up. We do have an hour, but if we're not prepared to have that conversation now, then I'm happy to have that conversation and what that might look like for housing projects moving forward. I don't disagree with Member Kama. I don't want to condition our affordable housing projects to death. We're already having a hard time. So I'm happy to figure out how this works best. And if it's not right now, if we're not prepared to have that conversation right now, then I'm open to still having that conversation and finding a balance of what cost, safety, and affordable housing and workforce projects look like in the future. Thank you, Chair.
Member Sinensi.
Thank you, Chair. I think, Mr. McNeff, he shared some of the hardening efforts that the utility is doing, but I think there's another issue too, that moving forward, and we're seeing this all over the country, that if in high wind events, shutting off the electric is now going to be a regular standard too, if we see that this is a danger to communities, especially with overhead lines. So I think those are more reasons to consider this bill, Chair. Thank you.
Member Johnson.
Okay, I can read the room. It sounds like we might defer this item. How about this as a compromise? If we defer this item, can it come into my committee?
We can keep talking about it. We don't have to defer it right now. I'm just saying, like, we have time. If the appetite for the members want to continue to discuss it, then speak up. I think Member Kama, anybody want to go through again and discuss it? Member Johnson, I guess let me ask this. If we defer it now, let's talk about when it comes back to your committee, the aspects that we would be focusing on and discussing to pass the bill. I am not opposed to passing the bill in itself. I think underground electric is great. The pros and the cons. It's harder to fix when you have to fix, but it's less likely that you're going to have to fix it from a wind event. It's prettier, safer in some ways. I'm not against it. I just mandating it, depending upon archaeological impacts, could be slow something down for 2 years when they're just doing an investigation. Blue Rock can make it much more expensive in one area than another area. So the terrain, the grade. So passing a uniform this unilaterally, just as a builder, I'm not against it. I'm just like having a new regulation that everybody has to comply with no matter what. Let's continue to talk about it and figure out the ins and the outs so that it's expensive to build. And we have a highly regulatory environment to build anything. Our fire code is becoming more stringent appropriately. insurance is becoming more expensive. I don't know if this will make insurance less expensive. That would be a really good thing for us to find out. So by all means, I'm not in a hurry. Please make your case. You know, I don't want to defer it and then go through all this again. I'd like to get drilled down on it. I want to respect what the issue, the perspectives are, and we collectively make a decision. Chair Lee?
I'm going to have to leave pretty soon. I don't think we're going to find the answer today, really. I mean, this kind of subject takes a lot more discussion and research. Member Johnson, maybe you want to think about creating a fund in the budget, a permanent fund. Thank you.
Chair, seeing that sounds like we're gonna be concluding the meeting. I saw planning was in the room. Maybe we can give him a 2 or 3 minute and then leave on, have him have a say.
Oh, by all means. Mr. Post?
Can I also request the next time this is brought up, we have housing present as well?
Okay.
Thank you, members. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair, and I apologize for being late. I was at a planning commission meeting, so I just popped in here. I don't think the department's is opposed to the bill really at all. We just, in our November 2023 correspondence, which is Granicus, I think number 7, we had a couple of minor comments related to it, specifically regarding whether or not you want to make provisions, and I'm sorry I didn't hear any of the discussion that you had to date, whether or not there would be any provisions you wanted to make to address whether the undergrounding would affect cultural or historic areas of significance and so forth. And right now there's a variance procedure that allows the director to, or allows the variance to occur for topographical concerns and other things like that, but nothing related to cultural or historic. So wondering if you wanted to add something like that to the bill. That's all that we had to offer.
Member Johnson, you have questions or?
No, thanks for being a resource, Mr. Post, and that's a valid concern. We certainly take a look at it. Thank you.
So, Member Post, Mr. Post, in summary, basically, and I can look at it, but it's the planning department was proposing if geographical exception, and that would be made by the Public Works or planning?
We were actually making a recommendation that's by the Public Works Director.
Okay.
That he can consider accepting undergrounding for certain situations. We even put in there for potential affordable housing component as a concern, affordability, obviously. So just adding whether or not you'd want to add that. It's in our correspondence that we sent to you. So.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Member Senensi.
Thank you, Chair. I just wasn't sure if Hiko wanted to respond to my last comment about shutting off the electric in big storm events. Did you want to respond to that?
Did he get the opportunity to respond to that? I apologize.
Generally, yes, that's also part of the wildfire safety strategy. During weather that would be conducive to starting wildfires, that's when we would call, red flag warnings or fire weather watch days is when we would activate our incident management team. We'd send spotters out in the field. We'd watch the weather stations I mentioned before, as well as the cameras to determine if we needed to turn off the power to help mitigate the fire risk to areas. I know you mentioned it in areas of overhead lines. It could also be in areas of undergrounding, depending on how that underground area is fed. If it's fed through an overhead line, it still might lose power in a PSPS type event.
Okay, all right. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Well, I'm going to entertain a motion to defer this, and we can work on ASF to put the planning department's suggestions and get further comments from the Public Works and move forward with it. Okay. So motion, okay, by Member Chair Lee and seconded by Member Kama. Discussion? So you want to do a roll call vote? Okay.
Chair proceeding with the roll call vote. Councilmember Hodgins.
Aye.
Councilmember Senensi.
Sorry, is this to defer?
Yes.
No.
Councilmember Rollins Fernandez.
No.
Councilmember Paulton.
No.
Council Chair Lee.
Aye.
Councilmember Kama.
Yes.
Councilmember Johnson.
No.
Committee Chair Cook.
Aye.
Chair Lee is excused. Vice Chair Sugimura is excused, so that's 4 ayes, 4 noes, 1 excused. Motion fails.
So, Chair, if you don't mind, well, we don't have a motion on the floor, but I was going to add planning's amendment.
You can make a motion.
Okay, I move to pass Bill 90.
Second.
Okay, motion. Staff, you want to read the motion?
Chair, I believe the motion on the floor right now is to pass Bill 90 on first reading, or recommend passage of Bill 90, 2023 on first reading.
And we had a motion and a second by Member
Now you can
Senensi.
make the amendment, right? Oh, that's right, the new thing.
So, Chair, I believe Member Johnson made the motion and it was seconded by Member Senensi. So at this point, you can entertain discussion.
Okay, discussion?
So I'd like to make that amendment that what Planning Commission or the Planning Department recommended in their letter to the committee, and it was to maybe Mr. Post can come and give us the beautiful language that he had. Was in regards to giving the Director of Public Works, if you don't mind reading that in the record for us.
Sure, thank you. Bear with me for just a moment. In the proposed language that kind of in the middle of where it talks about except where a subdivision consists of 3 or fewer lots, Planning Department would say except where the subdivision consists of 3 or fewer lots, or as determined by the director, the subdivision includes cultural or historical areas of significance, an affordable housing component, or topographical subsurface conditions that would prohibit undergrounding. And it continues with the normal language.
So that would be the amendment that I would propose for the record, Chair. So we would need a second from one of these.
Mr. Post, would we add to that? I didn't hear, did you say the Director of Public Works?
It's in Title 18, so it refers to the director, so that implies the Director of Public Works.
Okay, good. Thank you very much. Member Paulton.
Second.
Okay. Ms. Rollins Fernandez, are you raising your hand for a question? No.
I have a question after.
Okay.
I think Charlie had a question. Oh, our Director Molina had a comment.
Director Molina, did you have your hand up?
Thank you, Chair. If I may, I would oppose this language and note that it's not within the current bill, but within this section of the Maui County Code, there is section 1820.140D, which talks to the variance process for the undergrounding requirement. And it does already refer to subsurface features, which are inclusive of, historic properties or burials specifically, and surface matters, which could include historic properties. And that process involves utilizing the BVA to make that determination. And so my comment is that I feel the concerns raised by planning are already adequately addressed in the subdivision code and are not necessary as proposed. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that clarification. So this bill as proposed and implemented would have those conditions in it already.
Yeah, so the existing code, which is not being considered for amendments today, already provides this mechanism of a variance from undergrounding through the BVA. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Member Johnson.
Chair, can we take a 5-minute recess?
Yes, let's take a 5-minute break. We'll be back at 3:55. Welcome, members of the Water and Infrastructure Committee. Come back into, it is now 4:01 p.m. Staff, you want to recount?
Yes, Chair, we were on discussion on the motion to amend Bill 90.
Member Johnson.
Chair, I'd just like to clean up the language, so I guess it would technically be an amendment to my amendment, but basically, the words that was used to amend, I'm just going to take it out, edit it a little bit, and that'll be the amended language. So, except where a subdivision consists of 3 or fewer lots, or as determined by the director, the subdivision includes historical areas of significance or an affordable housing component. That's it. We took out cultural because it was already mentioned, and it was basically the language that the planning gave us to amend. So that's the amendment, the cleaned-up version.
Could we
I'll
ask for
say
it
it
to
again
be
for the
repeated,
record.
Chair? Thanks.
Except where a
Sorry. Hold on. Let me get closer to the mic. I don't necessarily disagree with Chair Lee. I think this is a great idea and needs a little bit more baking. But if we're going to discuss the amendment, did we remove the language for any topographical issues, Member Johnson?
We did.
Can you?
Because like it was said, it was already mentioned in the code previously. But if you want more clarity from Mr. Post, we're trying not to be redundant.
I get that. However, in the code, it allows for topographical issues to go to the BVA. And this one is the director can make that call. So you removed it because it's in there and they would go to the BVA. I'm wondering if you might want to include, and this is just for discussion, but workforce and affordable housing subdivision and not just affordable housing subdivisions?
Okay, and just to check in, did we get a second for, okay, we had a second from Member Sinensi. Thank you.
So that friendly amendment would include...
Your mic.
Thank you. So that friendly amendment would say, or an affordable housing component, we would say workforce housing component. Does everybody got that one? That covers everything.
Members?
I do have another question.
Okay.
To my point where I think it does need a little bit more work. This is something we kind of touched on in committee where certain subdivisions can afford the undergrounding and therefore, aesthetically pleasing and probably safer. Where I don't want to put our workforce in any sort of risk because that's what we're discussing. In the beginning of your opening statements, you were talking about how you might be open to evacuation routes and having them underground there. This is what I mean. I really do think this needs more work. Not against it. However, would you then be open to undergrounding it in an evacuation and then the internal roads for the subdivision?
We are doing some evacuation routes that are easy, the low-hanging fruit, that kind of thing. When we talk about eminent domain for that kind of thing, it gets real messy. So I think safety first and evacuation routes should be all underground, and so let's just, I think the way it is the way I would do it. But if you want to make an amendment to include that, maybe bring planning down or public works down.
We'll hold on that so that we're not voting on any funky kind language. We'll stick to what we have, and then for, I guess, my later discussions, I'll support this amendment. We'll probably not just support the main motion so that we can continue this discussion, but thank you, Chair.
So members, take a vote on the amendment. Staff?
So I see Director Molina has his hand up again.
Chair, I would just encourage the committee to perhaps consult with Department of Housing because my understanding is that most housing projects are required to provide workforce units. And so presumably this exclusion excludes all regular projects as well. So just to encourage that clarity. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, so members, we can vote on the amendment and we can vote on the main. Do we need a roll call vote on the amendment? All those in favor of the amendment?
Aye.
Staff?
Chair, that's 8 ayes, 0 noes, and Vice Chair Sugimura excused. The motion passes. Now you're back on the main motion to pass on first reading.
Okay, main motion to pass on first reading. Do we need a roll call vote?
Roll call.
Okay. Chair Lee,
No.
Member Hodgins,
No.
Member Sinitsi,
Aye.
Member Kama,
No.
Member Paulton,
Aye.
Member Johnson.
Aye.
Okay, chair is a no. So staff,
County Rollins
Member Rollins
Fernandez.
Fernandez.
I apologize, I'm not here. Member Rollins Fernandez.
Aye. Mahalo, Chair.
Chair, that's 4 ayes, 4 noes, and Vice Chair Sugimura excused. The motion fails.
Chair. So if, can I just have this discussion in my meeting then, or in my committee, and you guys can have this bill? I don't know. I'm just trying to, yeah, it doesn't seem like you want to move the bill from this committee, but maybe I could just have the discussion in my committee.
Well, I'm planning on continuing to work on this.
Okay.
And
All right.
identifying exactly what we're doing. Member Kama? Yeah.
Mike?
Oh, thank you. So now that we've taken the vote, it's 4-4, what happens next? Because I would still like to continue this discussion.
Basically, I'm going to recommend that we defer it, and it stays in my committee.
Do we need to do like a reconsideration or something to keep it alive?
Chair, I'll defer to the legislative attorney.
Chair Safney, so because the committee has entertained motions which have all failed 4-4 and appears to be deadlocked, if there are no further motions, then Bill 90 will remain in the Y committee as the default without a motion that's successful. Thank you, Chair.
All right.
Good.
And for clarification, it'll remain in the Y committee and it'll remain active.
Correct. Bring it back.
We will work on refining it as a group.
Okay.
Member Hodges?
Thank you, Chair. The next time we have this conversation, I don't know if maybe Miko needs to be here, although your presence was very helpful. Thank you so much. But can we please schedule housing to Director Molina's point? That was yeah, I know you asked for that, but can we I don't know how to say this without sounding a little rude. Sometimes we don't get answers right now because they need to do research. Can we please ask that question in advance so that when we come to this committee again, they're prepared to answer that question?
Any other comments?
Do I need to send it in writing? No, right?
Yeah.
Staff, you got that? Thank you so much.
So basically, you're recommending that we invite housing, and are you also suggesting that anybody write any questions that they have?
Well, just this,
To the committee.
I'm not trying to tell anybody what to do, but maybe this particular question, how will this impact our housing subdivisions? Because 2.96 requires a percentages of our housing subdivisions, right? For our workforce. So if we're going to exempt the workforce housing subdivision portion, then what does that look like for all of the subdivisions? Is it, if we're integrating the workforce portion into the entire subdivision, what does that look like? And how does this bill impact the subdivision? And I'll probably ask Mr. Hart when we're done.
And we will also ask planning, and I appreciate Mr. Post coming after your long day, but we'll definitely include you into the next meeting. Chair Lee.
I think the representatives from HECO have been very helpful. So if they're not coming to the next meeting, do you have any last observations you want to share with us? Like if we're going down the wrong road, you know, we still have time to come back to the main road.
Or would you prefer to be invited to the next meeting?
I mean, thank you. We're happy to help in any way if you guys have follow-up questions or need more information.
Okay. Thank you all. Staff?
Just the adjournment.
Yep.
Chair.
Sorry, Roland.
Member Rollins Fernandez?
Mahalo, Chair. I have a question for Director Molina regarding what he said is kind of what's already happening. So if the new projects, the new housing subdivisions are mostly already undergrounding their lines, is what I understood. Is it all 100% of the area or not the 25% that's workforce units or?
I guess that's my question to the committee on what the intent was with that language.
Oh, no, but I'm asking like right now. What does it look like now? Because you said that the
Typically a
subdivisions.
project's gonna do it uniformly across the whole project. So if they're gonna plan to underground, they're gonna do everything underground. I'm not sure if it pencils out, if kind of the intent was to allow just those affordable units to be not undergrounded, if that makes sense for the project or not. I don't think that's necessarily practical for our project development. But I'm not a developer per se to know if it pencils out that way to make sense. But yeah, I think uniformity would be better clarity for both us on the reviewing side and for the developer. Thank you.
Mahalo, Director. So if we are going to continue this conversation, if the committee sent you a transmittal asking for the last projects for the past, I don't know when it started becoming more common to underground the lines. From that point, when it started to become more common, I'd really like to know all the information you have regarding what subdivisions did go underground. And because I did hear you say that DHHL's project did not, but I didn't hear you say any names of projects that did. And you don't have to tell me now. I won't put you on the spot. But
we can review the subdivision records and identify which, within probably the last 10 years or so, if any, have done underground or overhead versus underground. Thank you.
Yeah, so Chair, if we can send that on behalf of the committee, get that information, because what I'm kind of hearing from Director Molina is that this bill may not be necessary because this one is only about new subdivisions and it's kind of already happening. And part of where we're at is wanting to retroactively put lines underground where they are. And so trying to figure out a way to do that, if that is really the goal of what we're trying to do. Mahalo, Director? Oh, did you have any other comment? Okay, mahalo, Chair.
Mahalo, Member Rollins Fernandez. Mahalo, Director. Members, with your permission and agreement, this concludes today's Water and Infrastructure Committee meeting. Thank you, everyone, for being here for a great meeting. It was very in-depth. We still have some questions. We will get housing and pursue this. The time is now 4:18. The meeting is now adjourned.